So here now with more Tucker Carlson, host of Tucker Carlson Tonight. Grew up in California.
Yes, I did.
A lot going on in California.
It's the leading indicator.
They told him he was too brown to...
Well, it's a race-obsessed party. I'm not surprised at all. I mean, ironically. No, that does not surprise me. The whole bet with the Democratic Party in California is that changing demographics win it for them. And they're right to some extent. Immigration has turned it from one of the most reliably Republican states to the most reliably Democratic state. The question now is about the economy. Can you have a state that is basically Latin American in its economic structure? A huge pool of poor people, a small group of rich people, no middle class. That's what California is trying. Its leaders are basically self-consciously pushing policies that result in that. Half of all Californians asked this week said they'd prefer to leave the state. A lot of them already have. What happens then when there are no sort of normal middle class, people making $95,000 left with kids? Like, that's actually where California is going. I don't know what happens.
It's striking to me. Jerry Brown has been around as long as you and I can remember.
He was the governor when I was a kid, and I'm almost 50.
I pulled up a picture of him with Linda Ronstadt, because when I was little, I thought, wow, that Jerry Brown's a really cool guy. He goes out with Linda Ronstadt. And I thought, Tucker will appreciate this. Tucker will appreciate seeing Jerry Brown and Linda Ronstadt. But, all the young people on our staffs, they look at pictures of Jerry Brown today, and they go, wow, who's the old guy who's the governor of California?
Well, he is old.
But he has made an indelible mark on the state over all these years. That
sure.
And now, it's the first time in 20 years that there's an open governor's race in California.
And his father before him, Pat Brown.
That's
Edmund
right.
Pat Brown. Yeah. The funny thing is, this is how much the state has changed, is that Jerry Brown, whom when I was a kid was derided as Governor Moonbeam, supposedly planted opium poppies along the I-5.
President Trump just called him that recently.
Well,
because he likes that kind of throwback.
Like me, he's an older gentleman. He remembers that. He is now considered by my friends and relatives in California a moderating force. Compared to what is always the question. And so if you live in a state where Jerry Brown is considered sort of sensible and restrained, it tells you a lot. Looks like Gavin Newsom, the former mayor of San Francisco, is going to get it. Also pretty interesting, the same, not just liberal, but the same species of sort of pro-tech liberal will be running the state. I don't see anybody, and I talk to people in California a lot, in state politics at a prominent level who's concerned about the death of the state's middle class. They act like it's just not a big deal. But, the Venezuelan economic model doesn't work. In the end, it collapses.
Yeah,
you need a middle class to sustain an economy, and they're losing theirs.
A couple of things I want to ask you about. You're doing a series that I read about last night I thought was very interesting, that basically, sort of a diversity program in air traffic control in this country is potentially making us less safe every time we get on an airplane.
It's terrifying. I'm interested in standards and their decline for a bunch of different reasons. Diversity is one of them, or the sort of ideology of diversity. But under the Obama administration, the FAA changed the standards for becoming an air traffic controller and instituted a screen, a biographical test that awarded points based on how little you knew. So, for example, if you were unemployed for the last 3 years, you got more points than if you had a job. If you knew nothing about science, you got more points than if you were a licensed pilot. This is, again, for an air traffic control job.
This is
They
scary.
intentionally sought the least qualified.
No, they didn't.
Yes, they did. And we've proved it. We have the documents. Our reporter, Alex Pfeiffer, got them. And they don't deny it. I called over to FAA myself to say, can you explain this? How did this make us safer? Air traffic control is a big deal. It's a linchpin of our economy, for one thing. They couldn't answer that because they don't care. That's the point. They don't care whether it makes it safer.
I mean, it's really hard to imagine. I mean, there are a few other areas, but when you look at those maps that show you how many planes are flying across the country at any given moment, it's really hard to imagine a more important job in some ways for safety in this country than the people who are watching the air traffic control.
To award points to someone for failing in science and being unemployed for 3 years is insane. No one can defend it. And by the way, it's not just happening there. It's happening in a lot of other critical parts of American life. But the maintenance of standards, this is an impressive country because we can trust our air traffic control. We take that for granted. We shouldn't. And so it's worth fighting back against this stuff.
The only thing that should be the most important is who's the best, right? Who's the best person at doing that job?
Who's going to keep us safe as a sociology professor where you might be like, who cares really? It's just some dumb professor. Air traffic control.
Who's on tonight?
A number of people, including...
When I'm done with my show and I can kick back and relax and go like, hey, Tucker's on.
Hit the mini bar in my office. You're free to. Pamela Anderson is on our show, whom I don't know, but who's a much more interesting person than you might think and knows a lot of different people you wouldn't expect her to know, including Julian Assange, to whom she's very close. So anyway, I'm
fascinating.
Her in just a minute. Yeah, I'm interested to hear what she says.
All right, we'll look forward to it. Thanks, Tucker.
Thank you, Martha.
Great to be here.